guys, what's up? It's your girl Ray.
And Kat.
Welcome to Modern Outreach.
Welcome back.
Episode 4.
Part 2.
Part 2? Yes. Okay, I accidentally erased episode 4.
We lost our original recording, so this is going to be part 2.
It's all good.
It's all good, you know.
That's what happens in life. And you got to roll with the punches, honestly.
So this one's going to be even better.
And it's going to make us better.
There had to be a reason.
There really does.
You must have said something that was not meant to be seen.
Exactly, and now
Not
it's kaput.
sure
And we are back.
We're back.
So, recapping on our last episode, which was Who Houses the Unhoused? Thank you guys so much for running it up. It's doing, great numbers considering we're brand new to this, and I'm really proud of that. But I did want to say that security, supportive services, those jobs are not necessarily always looked at or mentioned, but man, do those jobs hold a lot of weight, especially in interim housing, which is shelter or like the transitional housing that one would be put in on their way to permanent housing. And I've seen the impact on clients with horrible security guards and horrible supportive services, and that is unfortunate because they really do impact a client's stay and overall their transition off the street as well. A lot of people take advantage of the homeless, and a lot of them actually start acting like they're from off the streets as well. It's very interesting, and some of them are very messy and really don't, understand what a person experiencing homelessness is going through. Maybe tone is a huge thing, and just overall giving more trauma-informed care. And so if they don't understand what that is, they definitely need to be taught. A lot of security companies that are utilized by different agencies, they are not taught harm reduction. And so I am suggesting that those things do get implemented in those roles because, man, does it make a huge difference.
And it's realistic that that's a population that's going to be interacting with clients, with people that are unhoused. So, no, that's a really great point. And I'd also like to shout out like the doctors and nurses that work with this in this field as well. I've noticed that is a huge point of contact to services, where they will then, maybe they'll refer someone to housing services if they are recognizing that is a need. So there's a lot of different points of access for services, and I think highlighting all of those ones are definitely important. Yeah,
for sure. Man, I can't shout out Venice Family Clinic enough.
They are
the
so
great work that they do, especially in interim housing with their mobile services coming out to locations, doing the work is just amazing, especially with people who are experiencing severe mental health, providing wraparound services, whether it's medication, making sure that they're getting to their appointments for medical needs. Outstanding work to Venice Family Clinic.
Yeah, and they're all over LA too. I think people think that they're just in Venice.
Yeah.
But no, they really are all over LA. So definitely a good resource to highlight. So let's get into the topic for today.
Okay.
Our conversation is going to be about street to subsidy. Nice. So what we mean by that is going from unhoused to getting a voucher, getting a subsidy, and then where that subsidy takes you. Whether it's permanent housing, whether we'll talk about interim housing. So let's get into the conversation for today, street to subsidy.
Street to subsidy.
What we mean by that is going from the beginning of being unhoused, that transition point to getting connected to a subsidy, and then from that subsidy, where do you go from there? So starting off, let's talk about transitional housing.
Cool.
Ray, what's that? What's transitional housing?
So transitional housing is the housing that you're using to transition into permanent housing. It is usually a stepping stone housing where you're supposed to be kind of getting connected to those resources, getting on your feet. Okay, now you don't have to worry about surviving anymore. Now you have a roof over your head. Now you can go into your health, your mental health, your physical health, and if you have any substance use concerns, you can maybe dive into that. Of course, getting counseling and case management, getting all your documents together. So this is a huge kind of rebuilding stage is transitional housing. A lot of people use it to their advantage and some people don't.
And to add, it's typically at no charge.
You should not be paying for
free.
transitional housing.
You have meals that come with that. You have a bed, you have a shower, you have a locker. And like oftentimes they'll help you out with like hygiene stuff as well.
Yeah, and sometimes you can even have a dog as well, and they have dog resources.
Cats.
So it's honestly a blessing that things like that do exist. Because again, where else are you going to get all those resources under one roof? Even when you get permanently housed, you're not going to have it like that. So this is a great opportunity for people to really take advantages of what they provide in transitional housing.
Yeah.
One of the transitional housing that I want to talk about, especially with the youth, are group homes. A lot of people don't see that as transitional housing, but it definitely is. They've kind of either gotten kicked out, ran away, or didn't have a home at all, and they're put in kind of like a shared living environment with other youth 18 and under. Again, they're not supposed to live there permanently. This is where they can finish up school, find a trade, maybe get ready to go to college, get a job, get their documents in order, get their resources together, whether that's mental health, physical health, things upon that. And of course, all the counseling that goes into a youth, especially who's transitioning by themselves into permanent housing without a parental. So that is a very vulnerable population that needs very, very attentive care. A lot of them do have addiction concerns, and that makes it harder. And of course, a lot of them have children. A lot of them are sexually abused. So one could just understand what a child would be going through, especially with other children around them when they're trying to get acclimated to society, and then they have to kind of deal with people who aren't going the same pace as them around them. So a really challenging environment for sure.
Yeah, and definitely a disproportionate amount of foster youth as well. I think building off of that subgroup, there's also the population of 18 to, I think it's like 24 or 26, that there's been it's a transitional program for maybe you're transitioning out of the youth program, but you're not quite at the point of the adult program. There's this like in between young adult program, like targeted program that really helps with getting connected to mental health. I think building life skills. We personally haven't worked too closely in this field, but it's definitely there. It's definitely, they go through a lot. Not an easy subgroup to work with at all. But again, it's transitional. It's the goal is to get this population more independent with their housing and more self-sufficient with that. So the goal with this is to get this population more independent with their housing, more self-sufficient, really set them up for success. And I think that brings us into the next subgroup of transitional housing, which I would say is just regular shelter, transitional shelter, bridge homes.
What are bridge homes?
So bridge home is very similar to shelters, but it comes with I would say, a little extra with services, and typically a little bit more private as well. I think when you hear like about like tiny homes or like the shipping containers, those are typically considered bridge housing because you have your own space. Either you're sharing it with one other person or it's like a single room. It still comes with case management, still comes with food, bathrooms. I've seen some where they even like they'll come in and like clean the unit even.
Dang.
So like there's some
Meal.
very nice like bridge housing. But again, it's temporary. You're supposed to be working on your housing with this, and it falls under the same category as shelter. But do you want to explain a little bit more about what shelter consists of?
Absolutely. Man, have I gotten my taste of shelter. Shelter is an interesting place. I will divide it. I'll divide it. Let's talk about women in shelter first.
Yeah.
Women in shelter, it's a different dynamic, right? Because you have women who are experiencing domestic violence, who are fleeing, and they should be, put into a shelter with other people or, experiencing domestic violence, or other women experiencing domestic violence. But sometimes, and a lot of the times, those places are full. And so they do kind of overflow into regular shelter, where they definitely should be accommodated for a lot of things due to men also existing in the same shelter. A lot of women come in off the streets and they do drugs. And so, they maybe sell their bodies on the street for money. They do a lot of things. And definitely do use their sexuality to their advantage when it comes to getting what they want. And so I made sure on my caseload, at least, that my clients did have a full physical, in which a pap smear, a breast scan, all those things that they've neglected on the streets, they definitely had to do when they were on my caseload. And typically we were finding cancers, sexual transmitted diseases in time. So thank God for that. But again, women in shelter definitely need to be protected. A lot of men take advantage of them, and unfortunately they take advantage of each other. A lot of friends like, oh, well, she pretended like she was my best friend, now my money's stolen out of my purse. It's again a place where it's not safe. And I tell my clients all the time, these are temporary relationships. These are situational friendships, meaning that in this situation you're going through, you need a group, you need companionship sometimes. You need a community in which you do build when you're in shelter. But that does not mean that those people are supposed to come with you when you get housed. And I meant that because you're friends with people that you would never be friends with anywhere else, but because you guys are experiencing the same thing at the same time, you're like trauma bonding, which is totally fine. But again, some people don't have the best intentions for you, and if you get housed, they might be jealous. Maybe they're not on the same track as you, and it could really flip and end out bad for you. So for women, it's a very difficult place. It's not the most cleanly place. You can't really keep it up. I mean, you can, but it's just really difficult. And with men, with men, it's a different story. With men in shelter, they aren't the cleanest. So, you definitely have to live with a lot of personalities and a lot of trauma there as well. But, a large community of the homeless population are men. They hold the highest percentage. And so more resources need to go in for men, whether that's job opportunities, whether that's racial profiling, especially for African American men. A lot of people who are getting out of jail, men getting out of jail are there, and they're coming. A lot of guys are institutionalized when they get out of prison, and so they're bringing that into shelter, that same mentality, which makes a hostile environment for sure. And a lot of people are trying to get off drugs. A lot of people are trying to get their mental health or not trying to get their mental health together. Then you have institutionalized people coming in. Then you have thieves coming in. Then you have, typical people coming in that just are, down and out in life. There's so many walks of life, and all those people are submerged under the same roof. And so it's a lot of friction. It isn't for everybody. And so once you get to interim housing, or when you get to shelter, you really got to buckle down. You got to get your act together, and you got to focus. You got to focus to get out of there. You got to go to your case manager meetings. You have to be involved with all the resources that come through there if you want to succeed. So, yeah.
Tell them.
That's all you have to do. That's what it is. No big deal.
So a few things I'd like to comment on. After
You wanted the interim housing breakdown. I hope you got it.
As someone that formerly used to work in a shelter, I don't know if you could tell. No, but I also used to work at a shelter, but it was a domestic violence shelter. So for survivors of domestic violence, for women and men. And I want to emphasize the difference in support that comes from a regular shelter and then a shelter for survivors of DV, of domestic violence. When it comes to a DV shelter, they really prioritize security and privacy. Normally those addresses are kept anonymous. They are also more accommodating with families as well, because oftentimes women are fleeing with their children, and they need a safe space to go. I think domestic violence shelters are really hard to get into realistically. You oftentimes find survivors of domestic violence in regular shelters because that's the only option, because there's no space in the other shelters. So I think that's a huge frustration we have in this field because of the lack of transitional housing, because it's not easy to get into. I want to also mention how most of these shelters need like a referral from a case manager or from a doctor or from some supportive service out there. It's not really walk-in, I would say.
Yeah, so typically a shelter is by referral. So if you go into the hospital and let's say you don't have a home to go back to, the social worker at the hospital can actually send in a referral to a local shelter. Then you have like your outreach case managers, right? The ones who are out there on the beach, in encampments, Skid Row, all those places, they can also provide referrals into shelter. If you, honestly, the police can also give a referral. Maybe a homeless person has been sitting in front of an establishment, especially one that they go to all the time, and they're seeing the same person all the time. They might say, hey, can we place this person in your shelter? So yes, it's by referral.
And quickly setting expectations, oftentimes you can't get in right away. I know working as case manager, sometimes you put in the referral for a client and you'd have to wait a few weeks before something even opened up. I'm not sure how they prioritize that all the time, but that was a frustration.
Speaking of Venice Family Clinic, an amazing doctor from Venice Family Clinic, actually, he gave referrals. And to be honest, they were quickly placed because these are people that are experiencing HIV diagnosis, AIDS diagnosis, who it is literally a safety, it's a safety measure getting them off of the street into shelter. So there's so many of those people who need like real life-saving medications on a daily or weekly basis to get them back right off the street. they're actually prioritized a lot of the times, and especially senior citizens.
Yeah.
So if a senior is ready to get off the street, a bed should be flying open for them. So again, there are people that are prioritized based upon the need. But again, just like, Kat mentioned in previous episodes, you got to be the worst of the worst before you get the attention, unfortunately. And those different scenarios are the ones that definitely get placed first.
But I do know that, well, I cannot think of a single shelter or transitional housing facility that does not also provide case management of some sort, that doesn't also help you with getting into permanent housing. And if you're not getting that service, maybe you should be.
Rat them out. Call the CFO.
Again, I don't know a single place that wouldn't be offering that service.
Yeah, but you know what? Honestly, look, a lot of people don't know how to house people. And I mean, I've literally had a whole place on my back, and I've housed for me, for the next person, and for the next person. So like, honestly, if people are not educated, if people don't know how to problem solve for people and get people housed, then they could be stagnant. And I've seen that. I've gone into situations where people were there for years and years, and I couldn't believe it, that people were in shelter more than 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then when you try to get them going, they're so comfortable where they are that they don't even want to leave.
Or like that option has kind of sailed. Like that kind of, or that goal has kind of like fled. Like you, after a point, you're like, all right, maybe this is the best that I can do. But again, like, it's transitional housing. It's supposed to be that stepping stone. It does make it a lot easier for your supportive team to reach you when you're trying to reach clients on the street. It's very challenging to maintain appointments that way. But
oh my God.
with shelter, like, you have a meeting point. You have somewhere where you know that they'll be.
You would think.
Supposedly it's easy.
I mean, still ran out behind clients.
I'm not saying it was hard. It like solves all the problems, but for some, like, it does make it a little easier.
Yes.
But again, that's just one part. We're going straight to subsidy. So, actually, before we go into the subsidy part, I wanted to highlight one more, which I talked about before: winter shelters, which I think is unique to LA. I have my feelings.
Yeah, it's temporary, so it's not even like transitional, really, because you're not going to be permanently placed out of there.
And when they open up, like October, November, they open up when the weather starts to get a little colder, and then they close again in the springtime, and then they'll open up again if the weather is really bad.
Yeah, hot.
But again, like, it's seasonal shelters with the understanding. Well, I think it's sold in a way of like, oh, okay, you'll get into housing after, but realistically, like, it's just extra beds.
Yeah, and don't you have to leave and then come back at night or something? Like, you can't even stay all day?
I'm not fully I think some of them, yeah. And then there's also, I mean, they do offer motel vouchers on a rare occasion, but
yeah, and it's just like one DPSS building, like in LA or something, who does it, and then it's like first come first serve, and then once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, transitional housing, especially like SROs, single residence occupancies. Like, okay, no one wants to live in those, buddy. Like, honestly, even someone living in a tent, they would maybe like a SRO, because it's similar living where there's not a lot. It's just like you can be safe, like, here for now. But again, they aren't kept up. They're not in the best of locations. And then you're working with like whoever's living in them, which is kind of like scary sometimes. You don't know who's living in there. So a lot of transitional housing still needs to be worked out. Still needs to be, I don't know, organized a little bit better tending to people's real need and providing the case management and the resources that they need.
Yeah. I think the temporary housing that I think works really well is when is like treatment centers, rehab facilities, because I feel like that provides a productive place to work on other goals while you're waiting for your housing, while you're waiting for subsidy.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, it doesn't always work out timing wise like that, but I always like to present that as an alternative if I'm working with someone that I do know is using. That way, it's like, okay, like, you can wait for your housing on the street where you are, or you can go through this month-long program and have a bed for a solid month.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, when it's presented that way, I think oftentimes it's like, okay, like, maybe I will try this for a bit. And
yeah, and I found it really difficult when I was a case manager that in shelter they didn't necessarily want us to like really involve rehabs and things like that.
Yeah.
And I really was like, how come? Like, clearly my client needs to go to rehab, and there's other people who are trying to wing off of drugs, and then they get to see a full-blown addict every day, and a full-blown addict being high or getting high around them. Do you know how hard that is? Like, why couldn't we? And, sometimes I did, regardless of the fact, put my clients in rehab. I had a young kid with severe mental health, and he was 2 seconds on the street. Like, his family was homeless that Friday. By Monday, he was smoking meth. So it's like, yeah, he needed to go to rehab real quick. He was worth saving. He had just started, and hopefully right now he's thriving. But I had to do that. I had to pull the plug. And they have great resources for rehab in LA. They really do. The Weingart Center, downtown LA. Yes, it's downtown LA, but you cannot leave that facility. They will keep you in that facility until you get better. And so they cut out the whole the whole world around you. And so you can focus on what you need to focus on. And it's in the central of LA, so your family can come and see you. They can check up on you. You're not far away from home, so that should give you, some relief that, okay, you know what, I'm not far from home, but I'm getting the help that I need. And people need to start getting the help in which they need. Besides all of this, I know we're talking about transitional housing, but something that I've learned working in transitional housing, 95% of my caseload, so I don't know, like 95% of 50 people are dealing with trauma from their childhood.
yeah.
Everyone is dealing from trauma from their childhood. The only trauma that I did not see from childhood were people who lost a relative, like a mom, a father, a sister, or a brother who were close to them, and that got them to where they're at. But the percentage is overwhelming about youth, like what happened in their youth and the trauma that they went through. And so, again, with transitional housing, especially with youth, we need to definitely take a much better harm reduction approach to things, so that transitional housing isn't this place where you have 90 days to get your act together until you are housed. It should be a longer process, and a more focused process.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I feel like, speaking of like going back to more like youth, I've liked the creative approaches to transitional housing. We talked about bridge housing. I also want to highlight Safe Park. Safe Park, I think, is really good for people who maybe are comfortable with their temporary housing being their car, but they still want to access supportive services, still want to get involved in case management. It's a safe place to park at night. Normally it's like a converted parking lot where there's security. You do have to have a working car, but it is a good alternative in LA if maybe you are worried about parking somewhere at night, but realistically, like, the car is the safest place for you to be. Definitely will share those resources as well.
Yeah, and here in LA, I don't know any of you watching, and by the way, we do have people in Canada and United Kingdom watching. That's what our analytics say. But anyway, here in LA, if you are sitting in your car, there's a high possibility that you will get shot. I'm sorry. Point blank period. You know it. You will get shot sitting in your car in LA. Now, I suggest safe park. If you do want to live in your car safely, go find a safe park LA. Honestly, because of that situation, I fear for people. South Central has the highest drive-by shooting rate for those sitting in their cars. Google it. It's a real thing. Not to mention, you do have to have, though, your registration and insurance. Yeah. I do want to reiterate that, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, shoot, for real? Like, I haven't paid my registration in maybe 3 years since the pandemic. Yeah, you cannot go to a safe park.
Car has to be functional.
Yes, you can't just park it like it's hot and sit it there. So yes, definitely that. And you know, in interim housing, a lot of people get really comfortable. I have to go back to that, because you get so comfortable that they're living. When I say they're living out of shelter, they're living. They're lying to people, saying that they're living this lifestyle in which they're not. I mean, it is wild sometimes. And the things that I have seen are just unbelievable. So people get really comfortable if they don't have the case management, if they don't have the resources, because they're like, well, I'm going to sit here until I get housed. And they're not in a rush to get their paperwork. They're not in a rush to do any of that.
No, and it's definitely dangerous to get too comfortable, because it's very easy for like shelters to kind of put an end date on your housing or your temporary housing if you're not working on those goals, or if they feel like you're not working on those goals. And it can be arbitrary, I think, at times. But I have seen, like, if the housing fell through and there's not really any housing ahead, I've seen people get kicked out of shelter just for not partaking. And again, like, everyone goes at their own pace, but it's hard to watch that happen when you know that person maybe got a little too comfortable, or maybe they've hit a bunch of dead ends with that housing. Maybe they weren't getting the proper support. But regardless, it's temporary, and they will make sure you know that.
Yeah, and you could be sober. You could
Yeah.
You could go to interim housing, and then all of a sudden, what? You relapse. And if you relapse in interim housing, then everybody's cell phone sitting on that charger, they start looking real good, real shiny, real expensive, real pawn shoppy. And you get to stealing, you get to doing all those things. You will get kicked out on the street. And then what? All of what you did in interim housing, that case manager has to make case notes. You are documented. That's documented in the system.
That's the other thing, is all of the agencies, they talk to each other. They all rely on the same system. So, like, you could try to, like, hop between services.
If you want to.
Pretty soon, like, we work with the same funding most of the time. Like, you see those case notes. You see, oh, okay, they've had 3 different case managers in the span of 6 months, and maybe there's reports of harassment or something. Like, that follows you. So, like, don't jumping around, like, that will catch up to you eventually.
Yeah. Like, you can't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Like,
yeah.
you go ahead and you do those things, but there are consequences, and the whole point is to better yourself, to evolve, to learn from what you've gone through, and now this is your second chance, or your third chance, or your fourth chance. And one day comes and those chances run out. So interim housing is amazing, but if you don't take full advantage of it, you can lose it in an instant.
Yeah.
So, what's next, Kat?
Next is rapid rehousing.
Rapid rehousing.
I thought you were going to talk about rapid rehousing.
Oh, I'm going to talk about no problem. So, rapid rehousing. This is when someone needs to kind of go back to where, like, a glitch in the matrix happened and you just need to hurry up and be housed.
I love that description.
So, rapid rehousing is for those who just need a little push on their feet. Rapid rehousing is for those who maybe have gotten evicted and they need to hurry up and get rehoused, but they need the help. They need the first, the last, the down payment, and they need supportive services. Someone who's going to help them stay housed. And so rapid rehousing is huge, especially now during these times. A lot of people are still trying to get back on their feet from COVID. Bills are still piling up, and there aren't a lot of resources for money, and they are getting evicted or walking from their leases, so they don't necessarily get an eviction. And so rapid rehousing is definitely clutch. A lot of rapid rehousing is unfortunately leaving the system, and there aren't a lot of opportunities for rapid rehousing programs. But, you know, they sure do come with supportive services, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference is, like, rapid rehousing is like temporary intervention, whereas, like, permanent supportive housing is more so an ongoing subsidy. So, like, rapid rehousing gets you, like, that financial assistance immediately so that you can then get back up on your feet and maintain those payments moving forward. Maybe you don't need that consistent, that ongoing assistance moving forward. It was just maybe like a blip, like maybe like 6 months, 8 months, and like that's all you needed to get back. So like lower acuity, maybe you don't have
prevention retention.
Yes, prevention retention. I like it.
Yay!
So we talked about what comes before the subsidy. Let's talk about what is a subsidy. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, what is a subsidy?
What is a subsidy, Ray?
Oh, you're asking me. Okay. A subsidy is a friend. Truly. It's gonna pay 70% of your daggone rent. So that is a friend to me. I don't know a friend that's gonna pay 70% of my rent. So yeah, a subsidy typically is a voucher. So a voucher, of course, is from the housing authorities. So it could come from either housing authority, whatever, SPA, which is the area in which you live in. And you could just Google what your local housing authority is. But they provide the subsidy. And so whatever your income is, your gross income, they will help you by providing 70% of your rent, and you have to go ahead and pay that 30% with your income, and then you're expected to pay all of your bills and live off of the rest of your money. And that includes any other form of currency you get. It doesn't matter. You have to provide every single ounce bit of coin you get a month, so they know exactly how much their portion, which is a subsidy, will be.
And they definitely check that. So that's Section 8. I think a lot of people know it as Section 8. And I think most subsidies are government funded. They are from the housing authorities, but there are some out there that are run by nonprofits or other funders that aren't necessarily through the government. So again, they're not as frequent, but they definitely do exist. They come with different criteria as well. So maybe if you don't qualify for a government subsidy, you might qualify for these other subsidies as well. So
that's like my dream. To like, we're a subsidy, like we provide, like.
Oh, like we provide that ongoing housing.
Yeah.
That would be
amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely one of Modern Outreach's goals.
Truly.
Yes.
I feel like we both can agree that like that is the biggest problem solver in this field. I mean, when you're providing the assistance for rent, you're ensuring that they're going to be able to maintain housing moving forward. It's based off their income, so you know that if they're not able to pay, it's because of a budgeting issue. It's not because their income is not enough to cover.
Yeah. And honestly, when you do have Section 8, people have lived generations and generations on Section 8. Their children have been grandfathered into their Section 8. Their grandchildren have been grandfathered into their children's Section 8. It has been almost a generational thing. And in my opinion, it helps so much, but honestly, it should be something that you want to move out of.
Yeah.
That it is a stepping stone, for you to maybe finish your education, figure out what you want to do in life, maybe get out of a hard area. If you have kids and you want to provide a better life for them, you might move out with a voucher into a safer area. Whatever the scenario is, do not expect Section 8 to take care of you forever. There has to be a growth spurt within that, and Section 8 really should be for senior citizens, if any. They should be the ones actually aging, like, not dying out, but aging out. Not aging out, but I don't even know the proper terminology, but they should be the ones utilizing Section 8 for the rest of their existence on planet Earth. Because they can't, because, like, clearly they're not going to be on planet Earth forever.
You're right.
But, like, they literally, like,
that's what they get to Mars.
While they're here, okay, before their shuttle comes and picks them up, okay, they need to be taken care of. And I feel like that's what Section 8 is. Or someone who is physically disabled who cannot work.
And who doesn't have a support system to support them. If you're on a fixed income, I think that's the population that it works best for, because realistically, like, rent prices are way too high. Like, if your Social Security is giving you $1,000 a month, how are you going to afford $2,000 rent and, like, for a 1-bedroom? Like, it's just
and
not
you can't
possible.
work.
That part too. So, like, yeah, like, there's senior homes, there's senior centers, there's 55 plus homes, but not everyone can get into these homes, and sometimes you still need that subsidy in order to be able to qualify for these homes. So yeah, subsidies are really important. Again, having it be a stepping stone. Graduating out of Section 8 should be seen as a good thing. I've seen it happen before. It means you're making enough money.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
It's a good thing, and that's where you want to be. Yeah, I know that Section 8 is extremely hard to get, and people wait years and years and years to get it. But during this time, especially the times that we're in, where things like Section 8 could possibly be taken away, people really need a plan B. And, things like this, unfortunately, politics be politicking. So we never know when these certain programs and housing opportunities are not going to exist anymore.
True.
So what does that look and feel like? And if we've been, leaning on things like subsidies and things, and these things are taken away, then what's next? And so, I challenge those with subsidies now to kind of start thinking outside of the box, prepping yourself, getting yourself ready to, if I don't have this, this is my fallback. Yeah. Because it's a scary time, and we never know which type of resources are going to be taken away that Americans so desperately need.
Like you said, like, it's definitely a blessing to have a subsidy. It's not easy to get. I think the why behind, like, it's not easy to get because, or more so, the waiting list is so long because there's such a huge unhoused population who are prioritized for Section 8 for subsidies. So they're not going to provide it to someone that's already in housing if there's someone on the street that does need housing that doesn't have the funds to be able to afford that themselves. So I think that gives a little bit more context as to, like, why the waiting list is so long, because, like, the truth is, like, if you are connected to a case manager, if you are connected to supportive services, like, you are prioritize for Section 8. You can get it a lot quicker than if you're pursuing it independently and just putting yourself on the wait list.
Yeah, and a lot of people who don't need Section 8 are on the Section 8 list because they know it's that long, and they're like, by the time it gets to me, I might need it. And so there's also those people as well. Take into consideration all the fire victims, right? Some of them, especially the ones who are up in age, maybe they don't want to go back to a home anymore. Maybe they want to go back to maybe an apartment, right? And so they're going to need that help with that subsidy, especially now. And what if they didn't have insurance, stuff like that. So there's a lot to take into consideration. What I would say is if you are on a fixed income, maybe you recently were put on a fixed income, make sure that you are putting your name on those lists, reaching out to agencies that might provide these resources. Again, even if these resources maybe don't exist anymore, I'm pretty sure that agencies are going to be looking for outside donors, outside funders who can still provide for people, because, man, the importance for housing is so desperate, especially now. And we need to work with each other and not work against each other, especially landlords, entities that can house people, not to jack up prices, not to make it hard for people to be housed, because transitional housing is so hard and in between to even reach. And when people get to these different programs and opportunities, they don't take advantage. Unfortunately, they don't take advantage of it, and they end up missing out. And so I would love to see people who are ready, who are committed to bettering their lives and getting out of transitional housing into permanent housing, but taking it on their own and not waiting for a case manager to solve all their problems, not waiting for a case manager to fill out applications and house them. When you are in transitional housing, it is your time to shine. Like, you are now under a roof, and you could better help yourself and be safe now doing so. And so please take advantage of interim housing.
Definitely. I think the way I see the system working with like subsidies, with housing in general, I think the more supportive services that you need or are like looking for, the quicker you get that support. Because there's, I think at the top of the list of like the most support is enriched residential care, ERC. That's for people maybe with more significant mental health that really don't have the ability to live independently, that need a more 24/7 hour care. They oftentimes help with financial, like the financial side of things, making sure your rent gets paid.
The application's this thick.
Filling out the application, making sure that you don't lose your housing because you're not, if you don't understand the process for doing that. So like top level care, the most support, I would say also the quickest to get into.
Yeah.
And then you also have like subsidies that come with continuum of care.
COC. Yeah, so a COC is awesome because literally they can go out and they can find any apartment that's within the voucher amount, of course, but it's more freedom. They don't have to be in a project-based building at all. They can be in a typical apartment somewhere, and the resources actually go to them. So your mental health is going to you, your doctors are going to you, your nurses are coming to you, and you have your wraparound services around you, that continuum of care. And that goes with you for life. And you can't get, you can't graduate out of it. Even when you do, they're still going to check on you. That's what it is. Making sure that you're okay, that you're grounded, that you're stable, and that you're being productive within your housing and not going backwards. So I love a COC. I think that was an epic idea for the Housing Authority to come with that, because there's so many people in need, but a lot of people still want themselves. They don't want to lose themselves, their identity. They don't want to be in project-based housing. Maybe they want to be close to family, and they can do so with a COC.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good like meeting in the middle in the sense of like, yes, you're still getting conditional housing because you have that support or that requirement of support, but you have the freedom to choose where you want to live, who you're surrounding yourself with, the neighborhood that you want to be in. And I think that goes along with like tenant-based vouchers, which is pretty similar in the sense that like you comes with case management and support, but you have the independent living, you're responsible for paying rent, for utilities. There's no restrictions on your housing itself. I mean, you have property managers, landlords, just like anybody else. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And sorry to cut you off.
No, please do.
But I also wanted to talk about something that people kind of glaze over sometimes or forget, but that's also affordable housing. There is tons of affordable housing where if you're in interim housing and you're thinking, okay, I don't want to live in this or that, you can definitely look into affordable housing. And they have, like, for example, the city of Santa Monica on its website. You can go to below market rate housing, which a lot of affordable housings are under those criterias, in which you could definitely get matched to that. And so what an amazing opportunity to pay below market rate and have those nice apartments and live in those great areas for your kids to go to school in. So there's so many alternatives outside of interim housing. So when you're in shelter or those places, you can tap into all these different forms of housing. You don't have to be stuck in a bubble or anything.
And I think those are more lottery based as well. They're more randomized. They're not prioritized the same way that I think other housing opportunities are. So if you feel like maybe you aren't as higher acuity,
which means
you need a higher level of care. Maybe you have a lot of additional conditions going on. Maybe you have more mental and physical health barriers that you're dealing with. So it's the way in which service providers prioritize people for housing is the best way to put it, I would say. But yeah, affordable housing is really definitely good to mention. I think newer buildings are also required to have like a certain portion of as like affordable housing as well. So like they're definitely taking steps to make it more inclusive for all economic levels.
Yeah, and to qualify for below market rate housing, I think that you can make up to $90K a year. So that is a huge spectrum of
in
people.
Santa Monica, though.
Yeah, that, and also I think they raised it across the board.
Really?
Yeah, maybe it's in LA or California because you know.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah, it depends on where you are, but in LA, a lot of people have a higher level per hour rate. So yeah, I think it's based upon that. But I mean, what a great opportunity! Even if you make $90K, you can still get an affordable housing. And so looking into downgrading, getting back, your finances right to prepare yourself to live wherever you want. I think that is a true come up. To utilize all these resources to get you better so that you can better take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Anything else?
I think we should talk about the most important one, project-based housing, which we've talked about, but it deserves a mention. We're talking about subsidies. If you're not doing tenant-based housing, you're doing project-based housing. So let's talk about it some more.
I love project-based housing. I think that it is a go. Whoever invented, thought of, kudos to you, my friend, because you a dog. You know what you're talking about, what you were doing. Because people need help. And you want to house someone and you want to make sure that they don't go down the same path as they did before. So with mental health, if they never wanted to seek help, if they didn't get diagnosed, if they never took their medications, you don't have to worry about that in project-based housing. They got you. All the resources are inside, meaning downstairs, away from your apartment, in separate offices, you can go and get those wraparound services. You have your case manager, you have your clinicians, or they work directly with your teams to ensure that you stay housed. The second reason why I love project-based housing is because if you are dealing with substance use, and maybe you are relapsing, or maybe you are in psychosis from using a substance, and maybe you do have an explosion, or you're going into psychosis at night, or whatever the cases are. Your neighbors, yeah, sure, they might complain, but at the end of the day, the landlord, your in-house case manager, they know what you're dealing with. They're not going to use that against you. You're not going to get evicted. You're not going to get a 3-day notice. You're going to get a knock on your door with someone asking you, are you okay? How can they help you? What resources do you need? They're going to work with someone, and that's really meeting someone where they're at.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what kind of housing people that are experiencing homelessness, or people with all these addictions or medical issues or mental health concerns, this is what people need. It might be an inconvenience. I've gotten a lot of pushback from clients. I don't want to go into project-based housing because of the names, because of the stigma. Because there's a stigma with the word project. I don't know who made that up, but
so stupid.
That was like, that's why that person doesn't have an A+. Like,
it's not project-based.
It's a C+ for that.
Don't call it
Do
that.
not call it project-based.
It's not projects.
Clown. Whoever made that up, no.
It's not doing it justice.
It's not. And people are missing out on amazing opportunities just solo on that. So I'd like to call it whatever the apartment actual name was. Like, if it ever had a name, I would just call it that, because it's so much better to just get around the project-based thing. And when I didn't mention it, they didn't care. They loved it.
Because it's a regular apartment building. It just comes with case management on site. It's housing with life skills.
Like, what's wrong with that?
So that's why
I wish my housing came with life skills.
Especially like if you're going like 5-10 years without having housing, like it's really nice to have someone there to kind of help you with those questions that you have. Because regular housing, you can't, I mean, maybe you can, but you can't just go to your neighbor and be like, hey, can you help me figure out how to turn my lights on? Like, if you don't know how to reach your property manager, maybe they don't live on site in that building. But in project-based, you can believe that they will be easy to access. They will be easy to get to. Your case manager probably is a lot easier to get to as well. Again, there's a way more understanding environment for living and transitioning out of homelessness. And again, it doesn't have to be forever. It can be a stepping stone the same way that shelter can be. But it's considered permanent based. There's no deadline. You can continue living there as long as you maintain your rent, maintain your recertifications. Please complete the paperwork every year.
Yeah,
Don't
they come
lose
with
the
subsidies,
housing.
and they come with subsidies. Like, they're also 70% of your rent is taken care of, and I've housed people in project-based housing with GR. So their rent was like $221. I've housed someone on that, and they took 30%.
I've seen rent being $6 before.
I know, and sometimes they don't even pay it.
Yeah.
So anywho, project-based housing is a thumbs up.
Pro project-based housing in
pro, and we need more too. Honestly, landlords, remodel everything. Make separate apartments and give them to the housing authority so they can create more project-based homes, and you can get that ching-ching.
The buildings are also really nice. I just want to point that out. Like, every project-based housing site I've been in has been like brand new.
Top tier.
Like, considers all the amenities.
Top
like,
tier.
Truly, like, some of them have some great views.
Yes.
Some like rooftops. Like,
rooftops.
Genuinely, like some of the nicest places I've seen. So don't rule it out.
Don't knock
immediately. Like, definitely keep an open mind with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So guys, I hope you are fulfilled. I hope you are overwhelmed with knowledge. I hope that you are madly in love with modern outreach.
Ask us questions. Let us know what you think. I hope this was informative. Yeah.
And I hope you know what transitional housing is. So now you can tell your friends.
Yes.
Also, I'm so happy that you guys are watching. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. If no one tells you they love you, Modern Outreach loves you. Make sure to check out our amazing YouTube channel that will have the link to our new what, Kat?
Our new website.
Da-da-da-da-da. That's right. We're putting our mouth where we're
practicing what we preach. We're putting our money where we have the money.
We're putting our money where our mouths are. And we made a website of what, Kat?
All of our resources that we've talked about, that we will talk about, that maybe we haven't mentioned, but are still a really great resource.
That's right. So please check it out. It's in our description on our YouTube page. Also check out our Instagram, our Spotify channel, and our YouTube channel, so you can get us wherever you like.
Until next time.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And Kat's gonna hit the button. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment, and subscribe, please. And thank you.
Konnichiwa.